Hi, everyone. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 6 of the Ready Learner 1 Lounge. We are super excited to have all of you here this week. We have a very special guest here that we are so excited to have the opportunity to speak with this week and have him share his wisdom and expertise with you. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to introduce our good friend, Eric Curts. You could use your emoji, show him some emoji love. But Eric Curts is a technology integrationist and author of the just published Control Alt Achieve book from Dave Burgess Consulting Inc., their press. We are so excited to have you here this week, and we wanted to hear all about the journey, the process to creating this book and what this book means. I know there's some people in the room who probably been following your work for years, myself included, but I'm sure there's a bunch of people who don't know who you are, believe it or not. So why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me here. And thanks to everybody for being here. This is my first experience in a VR lounge. So I am a lifelong learner today. I am. This is fantastic. I think I'm catching the bug though. This is. I'm already looking at prices on the Oculus Quest, going, this may be something interesting. So yeah. So hey guys, my name is Eric Curts. I'm from Northeast Ohio. In my 28th year of education. So I started off as a middle school math teacher many years ago, taught middle school math for 7 years, and then I switched from teaching students to teaching teachers, became a tech coach at the same district that I was teaching at, and then eventually moved to the county office. So the last 21 years I've been doing something in the realm of tech integration, tech coach type of stuff. I currently work at an educational service center in Northeast Ohio, serving about 35 school districts. And so my main focus is using Google Tools in the classroom. All 35 of our schools are all G Suite for Education schools. Certainly I support technology in general, but because G Suite is something that all of our schools have, that does tend to be my main focus with our schools, is helping them to find creative ways to use that in the classroom. And with budgets always being tight, that's been one of my big focuses over the years, is how to use what we already have. So, we've got the G Suite of tools. They're free.
Right.
What can we do with them? How can we use them in creative ways rather than always saying, okay, it looks like, I need to go purchase some other software to do X, Y, Z. Well, I don't know. Maybe Google Slides can do that, or maybe we can use Sheets in a way that you hadn't thought of. And so 4 or 5 years ago, I started collecting a lot of these ideas together on a blog that I called Control Alt Achieve. The idea behind that was, it's like Control Alt Delete for the computer to reboot your computer, but it was to reboot our classes. How to use technology to reboot what we're doing in the classroom so that kids are active and engaged and inspired and creating and doing something awesome. And so over the years, I've just shared hundreds and hundreds of ideas on that blog, and eventually got the idea of, hey, what if we put it all in a book too? Maybe that would reach some different folks that maybe might not come across the blog, or maybe some folks prefer being able to hold that in their hand or give it to somebody and say, here, take a look at this. And so I tried to collect the best, most exciting projects and plans and ideas from the blog and put them all together in the book. And that's what Control Alt Achieve is. It's how to use doc sheets, slides, and drawings in creative ways for student projects.
Well, I will start off by saying we here at Ready Learner 1 love a good pun. So I appreciate what you did with the Control Alt Achieve. Now, one thing I think people should be aware of, though, is your blog wasn't just a collection of kind of instructions, step-by-step, how to use tools, but really it was focused on the actual learning applications for teaching and instruction, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's always the danger anytime you put something in a book and it becomes, on a piece of paper there that, the menus are going to change, the buttons are going to be different, a week from now with Google, perhaps, certainly within a year. And so I've always tried to focus on, the actual instructional process and the activity. What is the thing the students can do? So it doesn't matter if they're using Google Slides or if they're using PowerPoint or they're using Keynote or they're using whatever the tool might be. These ideas, I use Google as the example because it's free and people have access to it. But these are activities that students can do with pretty much any software tool, and the focus is on what that learning activity is. So it's not just here's the steps to use a spreadsheet or a word processor, but it's how could these tools be used in creative ways for student learning, student creation, student collaboration.
And I think one area where I really felt like you were ahead of the curve was even back 5 years ago when you started to put out all this content and all these resources and examples, you were always basically like take my resources and use them. You didn't covet. And I think that was a real big shift that happened in education over the past 5 years was teachers not feeling like their resources were so, I can't share these. These are mine. Right. This Jeopardy game is my Jeopardy game. And in fact, you, I think, broke down the barriers there by just putting up a Jeopardy template and being like, have at it.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, I've learned from so many people. I've been inspired by so many awesome folks. There's to ever say that anything we've come up with is our idea, I think is a little presumptuous. I was just listening to a podcast the other day, John Green, and he was talking about those cave paintings that were discovered, I don't know, a couple decades ago, but they dated back like 14,000 years or something, these cave paintings. And the wonderful quote that came out, I don't know, I guess they found these 50 years ago or so, but I guess Pablo Picasso went in and looked at these cave paintings, and his quote was, "We have invented nothing." And, it's that, anything he has done in his entire life, he was like, nope, we have invented nothing. It has all been done before. And so I'm not going to ever be like, oh, yeah, look what I came up with. No, I've been inspired by students and by educators and by so many other people. And so anything that I've come up with, I have always wanted to just put it out there and say, run with this. Hey, make a difference. You do something different with it. Like, when I did my Build a Snowman activity, that was fun and people loved it. But then folks started making their own versions of that. And they're like, is it okay if I can do that? I'm like, of course, because now you're iterating, you're doing something more than what I had done. And that's what's so awesome. And, listen, hey, whatever people want to do with their stuff, that's fine, to each their own. But I've always been of the idea of, we're educators and we share, and that's how we make a bigger impact. That when I get these tweets or these emails from somebody saying, here's this second grader and, with a big smile on their face, and look at this, this emoji writing activity they did today, or look at this, drag and drop poetry activity, or here's a stop motion animation from this middle schooler. And I think some kid got to go home today, and when mom and dad said, hey, what'd you do today in school? They got to say, I made something, I created something, look at what I did. And I'm like, that is just such an awesome feeling to think that, something I worked on one day sitting at my computer in my office has now made a difference in some kid's life. And so, I've always been in favor, absolutely, of sharing and iterating and building on each other.
And, it's funny, we recently had you on the Partial Credit podcast, and we talked about how if you're a teacher and you've looked for a resource for G Suite, chances are you've basically come across your resources and said, you know what, rather than try to create my own, I'm just going to use the Curts resource. But I did have the good fortune to be able to read an advanced copy of Control-Alt-Achieve before it was released to the public. And one of the things I found so fascinating is that it could be so easy to mistake the book for a, like you said, rebooting or reusing doc sheets, slides, something like that. But what you were able to do was take something as mundane as like word count.
Sure.
And basically say, well, yes, here's how you actually do word count, but now let's talk about the actual educational applications of what a tool like word count means. And I felt like if you could do that for word count, then you can pretty much do that for anything, right?
Yeah, that was actually one of the challenges I did for myself a while back. I was like, you know what? I love add-ons and extensions. And I said, what if I told myself, okay, you have to use what's in Google Docs. You cannot use add-ons. You cannot use extensions. What could you do with only what's there? And so I started clicking on every single menu item and just thinking, how could this be useful? It's like with word count, it's all about, doing an activity where you have students write less to write better, where you put some sort of a limit and say, okay, you need to summarize this story, or you need to summarize this scientific concept, or whatever the case might be. You need to define this, term in your own words, but you can only use the old Twitter limit of 140 characters, or you can only use 20 words or something like that. And it forces you to really distill down and say, okay, what is the most absolute important elements of this so that I can get this across to somebody? And if you have the whole class doing that, then we could all compare our different ideas and we could come up with, what is a really good definition or really good explanation of this. So yeah, something as simple as word count can be used to help students to be encouraged to summarize and to pick powerful vocabulary words that are going to get an idea across in the most concise way possible.
Now, so we talked about the blog and we talked a little bit about the book. Is the book essentially like you've distilled kind of the best of the blog posts, or is it was the process a little bit different in terms of creating the book?
Yeah, I mean, it is primarily the best of the blog, but much of it has been bookified. It was a lot more work than I thought, because it's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of stuff that needs to get rewritten and updated. So it's been updated, it's been rewritten, there's things in there that aren't on the blog yet. There's things that I wrote just for the book. But right. Yes, in general, that is the idea. It was to go through and say, what were the highlights? What were the things that over the years people have just absolutely loved, the things that have been evergreen, that have stood the test of time, things that are activities that any teacher can turn around, with their students that next day and just roll out and be ready to go with their students. Yeah.
And so one question I have, and I actually have some personal experience with this, and I know when you mentioned something along those lines, I saw Mike out here in the crowd shooting up some emojis. As someone who has authored an ed tech book, we know that the editing process works where you hand in that book and then you mentioned it. It's a lot of work even afterwards to edit that until it's released. There's a long gap there, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
What do we do, or what was your approach to creating content for a book where there may be changes to the book before you even hit the press?
Oh, and there absolutely are. Absolutely, I guarantee you there are pictures in there of a screenshot of a menu that does not look exactly the same today, because Google changed the sharing window like 2 days before the book was coming out. I'm like, well, I guess, anytime I talk about sharing something, you're going to see the old version of how it was to share. But really what my thought again was to focus not. Yes, there are directions. There are step-by-step directions in there, but the focus isn't that. The focus is the activity. It's having students create stop-motion animation with Google Slides. It's having students create learning databases in Google Sheets. It's having students write choose your own adventure stories in Google Docs, or interactive clickable posters in Google Drawings. It's about the activity. Everything in there, it's not, just so people understand, it's not a teacher-focused book. It's for teachers to use with their students, but every activity is a student learning activity. It's a student creation activity. And so even if the buttons change a little bit, these are things that you're going to be able to use 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever the latest version of whatever the tool is, the concept is still the same. It's giving students options. And I'm not saying that every single student needs to do the same thing. Think about, giving students choice. So, maybe you've got a project and now you say, okay, you need to explain this concept. And if you want to make a stop motion animation, that's great. If you want to do a nonlinear slideshow, that's great. If you want to do, pick a tool that's not even a Google tool, of course, but you could, if you want to make a clickable Google drawing that, jumps out to all the other resources that you've pulled together. The point is, if you give the students those choices, they're going to do stuff you never imagined, because there's going to be some kids that aren't interested in stop motion animation, But those couple that are, holy cow, they're going to make the most
Right.
amazing stop motion animation you have ever seen because they're passionate about it, because they're excited about it. And then you've now got a learning object that you can use year after year after year, because now you've got this exemplar that the students have created, and now the students are feeding back into the classroom with the content that they've created. So that's really the focus of this is just to expand your toolbox, to have so many more options for our students to be able to express what they have learned in creative ways.
So I've expressed this to you numerous times over the years, but you mentioned the choose your own adventure style.
Yeah.
Dragon Quest is the example that you shared in those activities.
Yep.
Dragon Quest is my all-time favorite. For those of you in the crowd, Dragon Quest, one of Eric's students made a choose your own adventure fantasy tale, which is so detailed and in-depth that I've been playing this for years and still never gotten to the end of it. It's really incredible, and I think speaks really to the heart of what you were saying about once you empower students to, really go for it, that you're going to get some amazing products as a result of that.
Yes, you are.
Now, let me ask you something. So a teacher who would go out there and purchase Control Alt Achieve, how do you envision them, kind of diving into it and using it from the start? You kind of talked about some of the ways you envision that, how they can leverage some of the resources in there, but what is the best way for a teacher to really kind of dive into the meat of this book?
Well, I mean, although it's arranged, docs, then slides, then drawings, then sheets, and then in between each of those, I have a little bit more of a philosophical, pedagogical type of inspirational section in between each one of them. Even though it's laid out like that, it is not designed to have to be read from front to back. It really isn't.
Right.
My suggestion would be to, of course, I would say if you have the time, read through the whole thing. But my suggestion would be to check out, get the gist, check out what each of the sections are about and find the ones that kind of ring true for you, because you're going to get, there's, I don't know how many, dozens and dozens and dozens of activities in this book. You're not going to implement everything. In the end, we don't want people to become overwhelmed and be like, oh my gosh, it's great, but it's way too much. I don't even know what to do with this now. My philosophy is always the KISS philosophy: keep it simple, sweetie, or whatever S word you want there. And it's all about making small, meaningful changes. And so find something.
We appreciate you
that's
keeping it clean, by the way, for the virtual audience.
That's right. that is
Thank
correct.
You. So thank you for that.
My suggestion is find some stuff that resonates with you, that you go, this reminds me of this project that I do. It's kind of similar to that, but I see where I could techify it a bit. I see where this would give the students more choice, or wow, this would allow collaboration. And so pick out, a handful of these and try them out yourself over this summer. Go ahead and do one of the projects and use the templates and actually try it out. While you have some time to experiment with it. Having said that, certainly do not feel that you have to be a master of these things before you turn your students loose on them. If you go through this and say, now I see, I didn't even know you could do that with that tool. I'm going to let my students know this is an option for them now. Let them teach themselves and teach each other and teach you as well. So that would be my suggestion, would be to look through it, get the gist of each of the activities in there, and then pick a few that really click with you and what you're going to be teaching next year, and take it for a spin this summer. Try them out and build these things yourself.
That's awesome. So we want to take a few minutes to give you a chance to ask questions of our special guest and author, Eric Curts. So I'm going to turn things over to Bobby, and Bobby is going to explain how QA is going to work.
Yes. So if you look in the bottom right-hand side, you'll see a little button that says Raise Your Hand. Click that button if you have a question, and what will happen is I will call on you. And when I call on you, I will give you the megaphone, and then you can ask our guest your question. And we have our one already. Leslie. Hold on here, Leslie. Give me 1 second here. Leslie, we can't get you over to, hold on here. Raise your hand again, Leslie, and then we'll call on you. Anybody else who wants to ask a question, just raise your hand. In the meantime, I'll let Jesse and Eric talk.
All right. So how does it feel now? Is there plans for another book now that you've already gone through the first one, or do you feel like that was a lot of work and now I'm taking a break?
Oh, I would absolutely love to. I mean, the blog will always be the main place where you can find all my stuff, controlaltachieve.com. So I'm going to continue to put content out there. I mean, right now with COVID, my focus has been just a little different. It's been a lot more of let's step back and give really solid support for folks that are trying to do online instruction right now. And so, suddenly we've got people that it is critical for them to understand how to use Google Meet or Google Classroom, where in the past maybe they haven't had to as much. And so I've been working pretty much predominantly on creating short videos that teach all those concepts in nice bite-sized bits. I'm really excited because we got so many ideas of things that I want to return back to, which is, my main passion is, again, creative ways to use the tools. And so, right. Over the coming, months and years, that is what I'll continue to do. And if from that ends up birthing another book, then that is fantastic. I do have as a long-term goal. I definitely would love to. I do a second blog called Eric the Rad, where I share writings that are not technology. They are nerdy, but they're on mental health, emotional health, well-being, life, things like that. And a great passion of mine is to continue to develop those essays and those writings and pull those together into a book someday, because that is something that I think is a really important conversation for us all to normalize that conversation of emotional health, mental health, well-being, something that needs to have any stigma stripped away from it. And it's really important things for all of us to talk about. And I'm hoping, to continue to work on that as well.
Okay, Bobby, we have a question?
We do. We have some questions. We have a question from Nava Berg, the very infamous Nava Berg. Nava, you have the microphone.
Nava.
Hi, everybody. This is great. I love your headline of your book and Control Alt Achieve. Like, how do you come up with your covers and your titles when you're creating a book like that, especially when you're trying to reach a specific type of audience?
Yeah.
Like, what's your process?
Sure thing. So the actual title, that came from my blog. And so that was the Control Alt Achieve title I came up with, again, about 4 or 5 years ago when I started doing this as a blog. And it was, for me, the idea of I wanted to tap into technology, but education. And I thought of, Control Alt Delete. We use that to reboot our computer. How about Control Alt Achieve? Let's reboot our class. Let's try this again. Let's re-energize what's going on in our classrooms. And so, that was a decision I made like 4 or 5 years ago. And who knows, looking back now, would I have made the same choice? Sometimes you go, well, that's not that easy to turn into a hashtag. It's a little longer than I want. You start thinking those things much, much later, but you're like, no, I still am so happy with it. As far as the book cover goes and stuff, so the thing that's so neat is I had the book published through Dave Burgess Consulting, and they are phenomenal in their support of an author. The actual cover was designed by a lady named Liz Schreider, but it was designed step by step with my input. They were so awesome about that. They're like, tell us what exactly you said. What do you want somebody to think when they see this? When they're walking, like who's in a bookstore anymore? But if you picture that, it's of course it's digital to Amazon. But or if you're at a conference, and there's a table with books. What do you want this to look like? And so I was able to describe for them exactly what I envisioned with this. It's the idea of, and I just love it. It's it's this light bulb, and from there's popping out all of these amazing ideas and these projects that are coming from this inspiration. And I said I really wanted something that was more along the clean, not not cheesy clip arty, but like, line drawings, but clean, like line drawings with some primary colors to tie into the whole Google thing, but to be exciting and
Right.
explosive. And they were like, well, here's 3 possible designs, I mean, they took several weeks and they got back to me. And the first one, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I was thinking. And then that went through like 2 more iterations. And so to be able to get partnered up with people who get it, who are also so talented,
Right.
I could not have designed that. I mean, I can write the content of my blog and, I can come up with neat creative ideas and stuff, but to be able to do the graphic design and the layout, but to have folks who can hear you, it's like, wow, it's like they were a police sketch artist of the of the book design world. They were able to have me describe what I wanted to do, and they're like, "Is this the man?" I'm like, "Yes, that's him." It was perfect. So I give so much credit to them.
We went through the same process with the same publisher for Reality Bites, and we're doing it again with the esports book. And I have to tell you, I think Eric totally nailed it, because it is so amazing to have someone almost in your mind. I mean, and they do a good job of pulling it out of you, describe what your vision is, and then just to see it come to life is amazing. Bobby, we have another question.
We do. Thank you for that question, Nava. We have, John Spike, you have the megaphone.
John Spike.
Hey, first of all, just want to say thanks for having me, Ready Learner One, and appreciate everything you do, Eric. My question is, I always thought you were someone who maybe a book would never work as a medium for, because your blog is so evolutionary. It seems like something changes in the Google sphere, and you
Sure.
take, your blog accordingly with new instructions, new ways to use it. And so I always thought something kind of temporally locked would be really challenging. Did you feel that a little bit in making a book that, unlike the blog, has a little bit of a struggle to like keep evolving as things change?
Absolutely. And I'm sure there will be, I can only imagine they'll, give me the opportunity to refresh it over time as things need to get, updated, so that there's nothing in there that would be confusing to somebody. But really for me, what it came down to was the idea that I want to get these ideas out to as many people in whatever way is good for them. You think about teaching our students. We're like, okay, do you just teach one way? No, you try to, present information in a variety of ways, audio and visual and experiences and so many things, because not every student's going to learn the same way. And so, I did the blog for a long time, and I said, well, you know what? Maybe I should start making some YouTube videos to go along with the blog. Maybe I should do a podcast to go along with the blog. Maybe I should. So I started doing additional things like that, and finding that was crossing over into new areas where there were people who, for whatever reason, the blog maybe wouldn't have been their first place to head, but they're on YouTube all the time. And so suddenly now they're seeing these videos, and that's speaking to them. Or they love podcasts because they love to listen while they're driving. They got a giant long commute or something. And so that works for them. Well, I'm thinking, there's probably a whole group of folks that a book is that entryway. That's where their sweet spot is, and that's where their comfort zone is. And I've got something that I'm passionate about that I think is important for educators to know about. And so if putting it in a book, which, yes, as a tech person, there's a little bit of an oddity to that. I try to wrap my brain around. I'm like, no, what this means in the end is there's going to be more kids going home who said, I did something awesome in school today, because that's going to reach out to that teacher that the other methods maybe wouldn't have been that entry point. And that's going to give them that opportunity. So I am happy. I think next up I'm doing semaphore version, then there's smoke signals, trying to think of some other ones. In interpretive dance, I think, is one of the next ones I'm going to work on. So any method I can use to get this information out to people, that's the idea.
And John, we've had a running joke for years that before Google even realizes they're going to update something, that Eric's already written a blog post with the instructions on what it's going to look like. So Eric's pretty much on top of things. We know that. Bobby, we have another question.
We do. Thanks for that question, John. Christine, you have the megaphone.
Eric, thanks so much for being here tonight. I'm a huge fan of your work. As a director of tech and innovation, I often go to your blog to help find the information I need to navigate the teachers in my district. So you have always been a leader for me in the ed tech space. So thank you for that.
You're so welcome.
As the world is evolving right now and education is shifting and we don't really know what direction it's shifting in, if you could offer teachers one piece of advice for how to move forward into the fall, not knowing how they're going to teach, what would be that one strategy or piece of advice that you would offer them?
Well, that's a tough one, but I think the thing that jumps to my mind the quickest is the importance of the real connection with our students. That we need to, whatever we do, we need to find a way to be fostering that. So that's why, I talk a lot about in my recent blog posts and the things, it's about how to use a tool like Google Meet so that you can, talk face to face with the students, or how you can use Screencastify to record yourself so that they're not just getting, hey, read this and do this activity, but it's you being able to connect with your students and put something in there that is meaningful, and that's the thing that makes such a difference even before technology. I mean, I remember back when I was teaching. Again, this has been 28 years I've been in this. So when I was first teaching, technology was the one computer we had in the school, pretty much. But I remember when I would get involved in like an after school activity, or I would help be an advisor for a group, or if I would go to a sporting event and see the kids, those kids that I saw in those out of class activities, they then performed differently when I saw them in class, because we had a new connection. We had a deeper connection. And that's been true way before technology. It's all the more true now. Is we need to be able to stay connected with the parents, connected with the students, and using technology to keep that personal connection going. In the end, yeah, we want to do the best job we can. Absolutely. There's a little learning curve. We got to give ourselves some grace right now. We got to give ourselves some mercy. We got to realize that it's not going to be perfect. We're not in an ideal situation. But in the end, you may say, oh, I didn't cover everything I thought I was going to get to or whatever. Yeah, in the end, we don't teach subjects, we teach students. And that's got to be the first and foremost thing that we work on. When we have that connection, then we can fill in the rest of the stuff after that.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, Eric, I just want to thank you again for coming here, for spending some time with us and letting people know about your new book. And Control Alt Achieve can be found on Amazon.com. Or you can go to
You have one more question, actually. I
we do.
apologize.
Another question.
Yeah. Swifferjet, you have the megaphone. Are you there, Swifferjet? Oh, no, Swifferjet. Raise your hand again, Swifferjet, and we'll get you back on there. No? Okay. So I guess we don't have another question, but we are going to open up the room to the social VR part. So go ahead, Jesse.
Before we do that, I just want to again thank Eric. I want to thank our Executive Director of Immersive Learning, Bobby Carlton, for moderating and for also doubling as our interior designer. And I want to thank our Director of Content, Matt Catilla, for being our recording studio right here. And please join us again on Tuesday, June 9th, that is in 2 weeks, where we will answer the question, what do Autobots, Decepticons, and Galactus have to do with how we learn? The answer,
That's right.
Tuesday, June 9th at 9 p.m. We can't wait to see you then.